on this question of what happened to the Highlanders, because they had to go somewhere, I could give you lots of quotations. Some Highlanders who were cleared said they'd asked the factor, that means to say the agent of the landlord, where they were supposed to go, and the factor said, you can drown yourself as far as I'm concerned, so long as you get off what is now the landlord's land. And others would say that the landlord would kindly find that after he had divided up all this lovely empty land which he'd been able to empty with the clearance, after he'd let all the good land out to a big farmer, there were certainly small bits of wasteland which no big farmer would give him any rent for, and so being a kind chap, he would let some of the Highlanders stay there by dividing up this waste barren land into 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre plots, and saying you can stay there so long as you can try to live. And the curiously things happen at the same time. Potatoes had been introduced into the Highlands, and potatoes, believe it or not, are an absolute miracle crop, where you would get, by sowing wheat or barley or oats, you might get 3 times what you sowed, or 4 times or 5 times. With potatoes you would get 20 times what you sowed. And whereas if you sowed oats or barley or whatever in poor land, you'd get hardly anything coming up. Potatoes didn't mind. They quite enjoyed bad land and would grow just as well there as anywhere else. And furthermore, after you'd grown a crop of potatoes, the land had improved. By growing potatoes on wasteland, you were not exhausting the land, you're improving it. So you could then move on to other crops. And potatoes, unlike almost any other crop I can think of, potatoes are almost enough by themselves, and I'm saying potato inside and the peeling, almost enough by themselves to keep a family going. Not quite, perhaps, but with a little extra from other sources, you can keep going. There was a story, there was a group of people sent up from the Highlands to find what the Highlanders were supposed to be eating, and you were questioning a boy, and they said, well, what do you have for breakfast? Potato. What do you have for potato? What do you have for supper? Potato. No, well, what else do you eat? I mean, potato. What else do you eat? And the boy was, and finally after he burst out, a spoon. That's the only thing he could think of besides his mashed potatoes. And potatoes kept you going on this bit of wasteland. But also, don't forget, if you own a lot of land, firstly, you've got to have people working it, even though you rent it out to a big farmer. And some of these farmers hardly ever came. They were not only absentee landlords, they were absentee big farmers. But somebody has, even if it's a sheep farm or a cattle farm, you have to have somebody herding the sheep. You have to have some workers on the land. And so you wouldn't want to clear everybody away, because if you clear everybody away, who does the work? And furthermore, if you're a landlord or a big farmer with a new big farm, you would have almost certainly a new big house. Lots of big houses were built. at that time in the Highlands. Now, who's going to build the house? You're not going to build it yourself. You've got to get people in to build it. And furthermore, having built your big house, now to show how important an important chap you are as a landlord or as a big farmer, somebody, especially in the 18th century, has to staff the house. There are no vacuum cleaners. If you want to keep your house clean, you've got to have somebody going around with a shovel and a brush every day virtually. There's no central heating. If you want to keep warm, you've got to have somebody getting up at 6 o'clock, starting the fire, and then keeping on during the day, bringing you more coal, and finally taking the ash out, and so on. You've got to have a staff. And there are no laundries, there are no washing machines. You've got to have, if it's a big house, you'll have a wash house, and you have to have somebody who's looking after it. So if you're a big, important, rich person, you can only keep going with a lot of people helping you. I think it was Adam Smith who said that any very rich person needs about 500 poorer people to keep him going. 500, it seems a lot. But when you think of all the services which had to be provided at these vast houses, and how the food has to be grown and imported and cooked and all the rest of it, you can imagine how a lot of people were needed. So firstly, to keep the big houses going. Secondly, to run the new big farms, because even though you only had a few men compared with the population that were there before, you still had to have some. So that was that. Thirdly, you very often had, there are numbers of places in the Highlands where there's very good building stone. So you'd open up a quarry. Now you can't run a quarry without quarriers, and the owner of the quarry isn't going to go and dig the stone out himself. He needs people to do it. Secondly, this industrial revolution was going on in the lowlands in England. Almost every kind of metal had a tremendous value, had a great market value, and lots of different kinds of metal in different parts of the Highlands were there. And I just watched a squirrel going away. That was what I stopped. And he obviously doesn't want to hear about the Highland clearances. He's gone. So the various places where you had various kinds of metal, they opened mines, and a mine is no good without miners, so you have to have people there to do it. And of all these people who had little industrial enterprises going, there was all the way down the west coast of the islands, as Dr. Johnson said in amazement, they are now making money, these new landlords, they are now making money out of the sea, because suddenly they found that they could sell the seaweed. Amazing though it seems, with the Industrial Revolution going on, as I keep on saying, outside the Highlands, there was a great demand for alkali. Now, I'm no scientist, and I'm not going to tell you why they needed alkali, but they needed alkali. And one great source of alkali that the clever people soon found out was a particular kind of seaweed called kelp. And this grew in great quantities up and down the west coast of the Highlands and around all the islands in the Inner Hebrides and Outer Hebrides. And so, again, is the landlord going to get up in the morning and go and get his kelp? Well, no, he's not. He's in bed. It's a much better way of doing it. it's to get a lot of other people doing it and pay them a little bit and sell the proceeds of their labour for a lot more. That's the way to get rich. And that's what the landlords did. For 3 months in the year, that's June, July and August, kelp was in prime condition to be collected. It was a rotten job. And in order to collect sufficient kelp, not only the chap with his little acre of land, who was called crofters, but not only him but all his family would have to go into the edge of the sea, wade into the sea, cut up with a knife or something, cut off the kelp, drag it ashore, put it on the beach to dry. When it's dry, you then had to build a kiln with stones or mud or anything, and you had to start a fire by digging peat inside the kiln. Then you dried the kelp, because it was not the kelp itself that had a great demand in England, it was kelp ash. So you had to burn the kelp, reduce it to ash, and when you reduced it to ash, the factor of the landlord would come and collect it and would give you a pound or two for all your labour. It was a wretched job, and numbers of travellers who saw it actually being collected said that it was better to be a Negro slave than to be a kelper in the Highlands. It was such a poor job. And you can imagine up in the Highlands, if it's an overcast day, it's chilly, it's rainy, and you had to wade into the sea, so you're going to be wet. All your legs and arms are going to be wet all day. It's not a job you would choose to do. However, there were vast amounts of profit to be made out of kelp, because in England they used it for, they call it soda, and they used it for glass, and they used it for bleach, and with all the new cotton cloth industries they need a lot of bleach. They used it for gunpowder, they used it for a large number of things. And this was during the 18th century, when very often, in fact I think if you go through from 1739 to 1815, there's more often Britain is at war than is at peace. So during the war, foreign imports were banned because they were brought from foreign enemy states, and so the landlords were able to sell the kelp for high prices, and which they did. Lord Macdonald, for example, got 20,000 a year out of kelp, and I'm talking about 1800, so it's more or less equal to, I don't know, 500,000. Macdonald of Clanranald, who owned South Uist, which is a good place for kelp, he was supposed to earn 30, well, he didn't earn it, but he had it in his bank, 30,000 quid. So certainly as far as all the West Highland landlords and island insular landlords in the Hebrides were concerned, when these people were thrown off the land in the clearances, the landlord was very glad to give them a little spare bit of land, make them into what is a new word, crofters, and these crofters went and collected the kelp, burnt it, and the kelp ash was able to be sold to the new factories in the lowlands in England for large prices. So that's one important thing, important end that the clearances helped the landlords for. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please tell us what you think about it. Please comment, and if you want to press the bell, press the bell to join, and I hope to see you again, because we hope to keep on producing these videos. Thank you.